Greetings, everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. The recent Dask and Mass DLC not only added a ton of new archetypes, but also feats and spells to help round out your builds. I thought some of you would benefit from a list of the feats along with an explanation of what they do, so I'm providing that information here. If there's any additional content for Wrath of the Righteous you would like to see, be sure to let me know down in the comments. Here at Slandered Gaming, we focus on CRPGs, so if that kind of content interests you, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more videos. Let's walk through the feats first, starting with Acrobatic Spellcaster. You must have combat casting and skill-focused mobility in order to select this feat. When you avoid attacks of opportunity with acrobatics, or essentially a high mobility rating, you also avoid triggering an attack of opportunity due to casting a spell and failing the concentration check. So basically this feat makes it easier to cast spells on the go if that's something would interest you. This could be useful if you are playing as a character who likes to cut straight to the back line while using spells, like a Magus for example. Ambuscating Spell causes enemies to take a -2 penalty on their saving throws against your spells when they are flat-footed. There are multiple situations that can cause an opponent to be flat-footed, such as shattered defenses, being paralyzed, blind, and in the first round before an enemy has acted. This is definitely a powerful feat for characters who can take advantage of it. Arcane Spirit allows you, with a swift action, to make a bluff check against the perception of one enemy within 30 feet. If you succeed, the foe takes a -2 penalty on saving throws to resist your next spell. Again, this is fantastic if your spellcaster has high persuasion. Discordant Voice requires you to have bardic performance and is triggered when you use that type of ability. Allies will deal an extra 1d6 points of sonic damage with successful weapon attacks. That may seem small, but keep in mind most melee party members will be able to attack more than once in a round, triggering this damage several times, and sonic is the least resisted damage type out of all the options. This is definitely a nice buff for bards. The spell focus adds a +2 bonus to your check when attempted to dispel at your character level. There are other feats which cause enemies to become stunned or take penalties on their saving throws when you dispel their effects, so this is very powerful to have. I put together a Magic Deceiver build when I thought Gontrol Dim was going to win the Let's Play poll, and it would have been a mass dispel run for sure. Greater dispel focus adds an additional +2 bonus. The next 3 feats are pretty clearly meant to be used with the new Chalexian Diva archetype. Diva Style requires you to be a level 1 bard with a base attack bonus of 1, a charisma of at least 13, and you must have the feint feature. You can attempt a bluff check to feint as a free action when you begin a bardic performance. Obviously, to figure out whether or not this is good, you have to know what feint is. Feint requires you to have combat expertise and an intelligence of at least 13. You make a bluff check against an opponent's wisdom or perception, and if they fail, your next melee attack against that enemy ignores the dexterity bonus to AC. Many bosses depend on dexterity for defense, so this is a very powerful effect, and being able to activate it for free with Diva Style is nice. The problem, of course, is how many feats you have to take in order to make this work. You have to have combat expertise, feint, and then you would take Diva Style. And this is for Bard, a class that doesn't get extra feats. So this is a really large sacrifice on your part to make an effect happen that honestly you can create in multiple other ways as well. Hard to say whether or not this is actually worth it. Circling back to the Bard feats, Diva Strike requires you to be at least level 7 Bard with a base attack bonus of 7, a charisma of at least 15, and you must have 3 features, Diva Style, Feint, and Combat Expertise. Every round, while using Diva Style, the first time you hit an enemy with a melee weapon who has been denied the dexterity bonus to AC, you deal additional damage equal to your charisma modifier. Obviously, as a Bard, your charisma modifier should be high, so this could be useful, but also more than likely you're running your Bard as more of a support character. It's not dealing the highest damage for your team, so it's questionable whether or not it makes sense to invest more in trying to cap out your Bard's damage as opposed to using feats that focus more on its support capabilities. And then finally, Diva Advance requires you to be a level 11 Bard with a base attack bonus of 11, a charisma of at least 17, and you must have 4 features, Diva Style, Diva Strike, Feint, and Combat Expertise. While using Diva Strike, creatures you have successfully feinted against cannot make attacks of opportunity for in one round. In addition, you can make an attack of opportunity against those creatures. Triggering attacks of opportunity is always helpful, but again, do you really want your bard being the one to do this? And obviously, this is a massive feat investment in order to get this far. I would say more than likely this doesn't really work, but if you're absolutely determined for your bard to be the main damage dealer, it might make more sense. Since we just finished walking through feint mechanics, I think it makes sense to cover the other feint feats here. Final Feint requires a base attack bonus of 6, an intelligence rating of 13, and you must have both combat expertise and feint. When you use feint, an enemy's dexterity bonus is denied against all ally attacks instead of just your own. Needless to say, this is bananas, and definitely well worth considering. Range Feint requires you to have Feint along with a base attack bonus of at least 2. This Feint lets you deny an enemy's dexterity bonus to AC with your ranged weapon, and the debuff will apply to your next ranged or melee attack. Obviously, this is something to consider if you're a ranged character, but it's going to require a 2 feat investment. I would probably say that isn't worth it. Slayer's Feint requires you to have Feint, combat expertise, a dexterity ranked of at least 15, and one of 2 features, skill focus mobility or Slayer proficiencies. This feat allows you to use mobility instead of persuasion to successfully feint, which depending on the type of character you're running could be quite nice. The final feint skill is 2-weapon feint, which requires you to have feint, 2-weapon fighting, a dexterity rating of at least 15, and an intelligence rating of at least 13. You can forego your primary hand attack to instead perform a bluff check to feint. Not something you would use all the time, but against really tough bosses, this might be a nice option. Favored enemy spellcasting requires you to have the favorite enemy or demon slayer favorite enemy features, both of which would usually come from a ranger. Opponents who are on your favorite enemy list take a -2 penalty to saving throws against your spells. Now the issue with this is rangers don't usually cast spells offensively, so lowering an enemy's saving throws for them doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But the interesting thing about this feat is Hell Knight Signifier can actually take a rangered favorite enemy, depending on which Hell Knight order you select, and then it would unlock this feat, and those lowered saving throws would be really useful for that class. It almost makes me regret making Isaac a Mantis Zealot. Unfortunately, I went through this video after I had already made that build, but if I had seen this first, I might have decided to just make him a Hell Knight Signifier and try that out, because the last time when I did a Devil run, I only did Hell Knight. I've never actually run a Hell Knight Signifier before. So other than that, I would say this doesn't really make sense. Harmonic Spell requires you to have at least 1 level in Bard. When you cast a level 1 or higher spell while maintaining a Bardic performance, which you'll pretty much always be doing, you restore 1 round of Bardic performance. This could be quite nice, especially if you are focused on spell casting more than martial attacks, but just keep in mind, even without this, you get plenty of rounds of Bardic performance, so it's not crazy useful. You can easily just swap it for something else. 2 meta magic feats have been added into the game, and both of them require you to have an intelligence of at least 3. Meta magic intensified spell increases the maximum number of damage dice for a spell by 5 levels, while also increasing the spell's level by 1 in your spell book. This is fantastic for spells that have hard damage caps based on caster level, such as Hellfire Ray or the more powerful Angel attacks. Meta Magic Piercing Spell allows your spells to treat an enemy's spell resistance as 5 points lower, while also increasing the spell's level by 1 in your spellbook. On core difficulty, I would say this is unnecessary, but perhaps this does serve a purpose on unfair. In addition to these 2 feats, there are 2 corresponding favorite meta magic mythic abilities that will let you remove the spell level increase if you so choose. Raging Brutality requires you to have Power Attack, a base attack bonus of 12, a strength value of at least 13, and you must have one of the following features: Focus Rage, Rage, Devastating Form, Inspired Rage, or Demonic Rage. While raging and using Power Attack as a swift action, you can add your Constitution bonus on damage rolls for melee or thrown weapon attacks. This increases to 1.5 times your Constitution bonus if you are using a 2-handed weapon. I suppose there are a couple of builds where this would be useful, but most of the time a high Constitution modifier isn't very helpful. Spellbane requires you to either have Bane or Sacred Word, and it's triggered when Bane is active. Enemies receive a -2 penalty on saving throws against your spells. Bane and Sacred Word come from the Inquisitor line of classes, and I don't consider them to be strong offensive spellcasters. Therefore, I would say this isn't really useful, except that you can also get Bane from Aeon, and of course, you could pair that mythic path with a class that could really benefit from this. Finally, Spell Chain requires you to have spell penetration, and it's a teamwork feat, so at least one other nearby party member must have this in order for it to trigger. When you make a caster level check to overcome an enemy's spell resistance, an ally who attempts to do the same thing can roll twice. This could obviously be invaluable when used on enemies who have high defenses against magic. Plus, there aren't a whole lot of great feat options for spellcasters, so it should be easy to fit this in. Alright, that is all the new feats that have been added to the game with the Dance of Mass DLC, so let's move on to the spells. For each spell, I'll tell you its level in the spellbook where I found it, but of course that doesn't mean it's not available in other spellbooks. Keep in mind, it seems like a lot of these spells were really added for Magic Deceiver so that they could be combined to make specific effects. Incendiary Runes is a level 1 spell in the Wizard spellbook that targets all creatures in a close range 10-foot burst. You trace a rune in the middle that explodes for 1d6 points of fire damage, and all creatures caught in the blast must pass a reflex save or they will start burning. Burning creatures take 1d6 points of fire damage every round for 1 minute, but they do attempt to save every round to end the burning. Not bad, but personally I think crowd control spells are much better early on, and damage focused spellcasting doesn't get good until later. Haunting Mist is a level 2 spell in the Wizard spellbook that targets all creatures in a close range 20-foot burst. You put up a mist that causes all attacks within to have a 50% miss chance, and all creatures must pass a save or they take 1d2 points of wisdom damage and suffer the shaking condition for 1d4 rounds. I don't like giving a group of enemies total concealment, and the attribute damage is small, so personally, I wouldn't use this. Keen Edge is a level 3 spell in the Wizard spellbook which targets one friendly creature within close range. This spell doubles the threat range of any piercing or slashing weapon. This effect doesn't stack with anything else, so the spell is only useful until you get access to improved critical, but until then, it's definitely nice. Excruciating Deformation is a level 3 spell in the Wizard spellbook that targets one enemy within touch range. Every round, the target takes 2d6 points of direct damage, loses 1 point of dexterity, loses 1 point of constitution, and its speed is reduced by 10 feet. Once per round, the target can attempt a fortitude save to resist the spell. This could be very nice for a class like Magus. Explosive Runes is a level 3 spell in the Wizard spellbook, and it targets all creatures within a close range 10-foot burst. Impacted creatures receive 66 points of force damage, with the vast majority of enemies do not resist. Very, very nice. Silver Darts is a level 3 spell in the Wizard spellbook which targets all creatures in a 15-foot cone, dealing 1d6 points of piercing damage per caster level up to 10d6. Enemies can pass a reflex saving throw to half this damage. Most likely your DPS mage is focused on elemental damage, so this isn't going to be all that great, but at the time when you get it, Silver Darts is a decent option. Curse of Magic Negation is a level 4 spell in the Wizard spellbook that targets one enemy within touch range. For 10 minutes per level, that enemy will gain a spell resistance of 10 plus your caster level, and anytime they cast a spell, they must make a caster level check of 1d20 plus their caster level against the new spell resistance. If the check is successful, they will cast the spell, and the spell resistance will be removed until the start of their next turn. If they fail the check, then the spell will not be cast, but the spell isn't lost and they can attempt to cast it again. Feats or abilities that allow an enemy to bypass spell resistance also allow them to bypass this check. They can also attempt to dispel this effect, but the roll will have a -5 penalty. Fantastic for classes like Magus, who can make a beeline for spellcasters, or your debuff casters if they put the Reach Metamagic feat on this. Purging Finale is a level 3 spell in the Bard spellbook, which targets one friendly creature in close range, and you must have a bardic performance in effect to use this. You can end your performance and subsequently remove one condition for an ally. dazzled, exhausted, paralyzed, shaken, or stunned. This is interesting and could be useful in a pinch. Reviving Finale is a level 3 spell in the Bard spellbook, which targets all allies in a 20-foot burst centered on the caster. You can end your performance and subsequently heal allies for 2d6 hit points plus 1 per 2 caster levels. If you are focused on your Bard being a healer, this could be something to consider, but I prefer my primary healers to have channel energy as a feature. Heaven's Winged Strike is a level 5 spell in the Bard spellbook that targets all creatures in a 30-foot cone, paralyzing them for 1d4 rounds. A Fortitude save negates this effect, but man, in the right situation, this could be really powerful. Song of Discord Greater is a level 6 spell in the Bard spellbook, which targets all enemies in a medium-range 20-foot burst. Impacted enemies will gain a +4 morale bonus to strength and automatically attack their nearest target every round for the duration of the spell. The lesser version of this only provides a 50% chance that enemies will attack their nearest target. A will save causes this effect to only last 1 round. This is very powerful, especially when you can get it off early before melee combatants are in range of your allies. Arcanist gets a suite of peer into spells that allow you to penalize an enemy's stats. None of these spells are affected by spell resistance, and only one of them has a saving throw. Peer into Energy Resistance is a level 1 spell in the Arcanist spellbook, which targets one enemy within close range, reducing their energy resistances by 1 per caster level. You could take the Sorcerer's Reflex Mythic ability and then cast this as a swift action while still using your standard action for an attack spell and potentially bypass the need for a Mythic Elemental ability. Not sure how viable that is, but it sure is interesting. Peer into Reflexes is a level 2 spell in the Arcanist spellbook, which targets one enemy within close range, lowering their reflex save by 1 for every 3 caster levels up to a maximum of 6. Definitely not worth it right when you get it, but by the time it's a penalty of 2 or 3, this could be worth considering. Peer into Mind is a level 3 spell in the Arcanist spellbook, which does the same thing as Peer into Reflexes, except it targets Will instead of Reflex. Some of the most powerful debuffs in the game target Will, so this could be very useful. Also keep in mind that Mind Deceiver is an Arcanist archetype and allows you to shift which stat a spell targets. So you could have all of your debuffs target Will, and then make this spell a standard part of your repertoire. Peer into Endurance is a level 4 spell in the Arcanist spellbook, which does the same thing as Peer into Reflexes, except it targets Fortitude instead of Reflex. Peer into Avoidance is a level 5 spell in the Arcanist spellbook, which does the same thing as Peer into Reflexes, except it targets Touch AC instead of Reflex. The penalty increases every 2 caster levels instead of every 3, and the maximum penalty is 10 instead of 6. Touch AC is already low as it is, so personally, I don't think this is all that useful. Finally, Peer into Spell Resistance does the same thing as Peer into Avoidance, except it targets spell resistance instead of AC, and there is no save. For most of the game, I would say this isn't crazy useful, but there are a few really tough monsters whose spell resistance you'll have trouble penetrating. The last spell on the list is Arcana Theft. It's a level 5 Arcanist spell, and it attempts to dispel one effect from an enemy within touch range. If this is successful, the effect is transferred to you. Keep in mind you must accept the effect, even if it's not beneficial, and the spell maintains its original duration. Kind of dicey, but in the right situation, it could really help swing a fight. That's all the information I have regarding the new feats and spells in Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous. Let me know down in the comments if you have any questions. Hope all of you enjoyed this video. Take care.